Well, I can go now after that introduction. It's good. I think that for those of you, I don't know how many of you know our practice. We are design practice. So our background started in industrial design and furniture design, and we work in industry. But we've always worked from a different perspective. And I think I'm going to start because I'm accelerating myself. The presentation, as you can start seeing, is going to be very messy. And maybe you won't understand anything, but that's the part of the point. I think that as I go along, hopefully it will make sense. So this is Alpha 60.
Il arrive que la réalité soit trop complexe pour la transmission orale. La légende la recrée sous une forme qui lui permet de courir le monde.
I'm sure you're all familiar with Alphaville Godard's film. And I think these are the opening credits, and suddenly you hear this voice that then you come to learn that it's Alpha 60, that is this computer that runs Alphaville. It creates the introduction through this quote directed from Borges, where he's talking about the reality is so complex that it's impossible really to transmit orally or transmit in any way, and that in our attempt to do it so, what we create is a myth, and the myth is like blurs in reality what this reality is. It creates a force of its own. I'll come now. And now is dreams, and this is the loose, and somehow it makes sense because when you, I mean, this is in his later years, but every time I see it, I always imagine him as Alpha 60, the
Je pense à
computer.
Minelli.
So it has like
Minelli
this
a une
similarity in
idée
his
extraordinaire
voice.
sur le rêve. Elle est très simple, on peut la dire, et elle est engagée dans tout un processus cinématographique qui est l'œuvre de Minelli. Et la grande idée de Minelli sur le rêve, il me semble, c'est que le rêve concerne avant tout ceux qui ne rêvent pas. Le rêve de ceux qui rêvent concerne ceux qui ne rêvent pas. Et pourquoi ça les concerne? Parce que dès qu'il y a un rêve de l'autre, il y a danger. À savoir que le rêve des gens est toujours un rêve dévorant qui risque de nous engloutir. Et que les autres rêves, c'est très dangereux. Et que le rêve est une terrible volonté de puissance. Et que chacun de nous est plus ou moins victime du rêve des autres. Même quand c'est la plus gracieuse jeune fille, même quand c'est la plus gracieuse jeune fille, c'est une terrible dévorante, pas par son âme, mais par ses rêves. Méfiez-vous du rêve de l'autre, parce que si vous êtes pris dans le rêve de l'autre, vous êtes foutu. Ne soyez jamais pris dans le rêve de l'autre. Alors, vous comprenez, quand on a une idée comme ça, la question n'est vraiment pas de savoir si elle est vraie ou si elle est fausse. La question est...
I mean, and it's about this assertion about the dream. The dreams are dangerous because those who dream involve us in the dreams, and often what we think of reality is this dream that we're living is someone else's dream, it's not our dream. You as a PhD student, your questions will be, are you in your supervisor's dream, or are you in your own dreams? It's like, for us, this is really what our role as designers is, no? Is to try to identify in which dream we are. And as many designers, we started in someone else's dream. It was the dream of being an industrial designer. And suddenly we realized that all the things that interested us about design were not that dream, and that we had to construct our own dream, our own world of where we could work as designers. And this is quite important. I think that as students, I mean, you're no longer students, you are professionals doing your PhD. It is important to identify that thing that really drives you in your investigations, no, in your research. And more than research, in your searching. And I think that is quite a tricky thing to come to terms with. I think that for us, it was very much coming to the conclusion that what we were interested in was the idea of the model. The model, because models are not perfect. Models are aesthetic propositions of an idea. Because, I mean, we are now used to, because of the digital technology, that you model something on a computer is almost like a prototype that works in 3D. But in reality, for us, the model has a previous existence that is even before the idea. No? It's like a model that we start using even to start imagining what is that thing that we want to do. And for us, we've been working we started working in '97, and in '99 we started being involved in education. And the academic and teaching of design and our own practice is the same thing. I think a lot of the projects that we do is in order to make sense in terms of what are the things that interest us and the things that could be interesting for our students. So, for example, this is like examples of a workshop that we propose as allusive objects. And this is in terms of generating models that are before ideas. So it's like how we can workshop and try to imagine and try to play with the things that we know about objects in terms of reimagining what the new realities that offer us. So basically these are based in the idea of edition and to try to create conflict between the things that you put together. So it's like following Eisenstein's ideas of montage. No, instead of achieving continuity, we are trying to create a contrast that is going to generate a new idea. So these are workshops designed for artists and people who are not technologically minded to start thinking about technology without any knowledge of technology. So it's always this moment of creating objects and then trying to recontextualize them and create iterations that will take them to a different kind of thing. So for example, these are for a series of students in Goldsmiths. And this is probably one of the first times we ever ran this project. It was in Hamburg. And this was a selection of art students in Hamburg. None of them had any kind of technological background, but being German, they were amazing technical minds. So these guys, he created this suit that actually worked, that transformed bacteria into activity into energy. Or this person was a girl that created these solar cooking machines. And both of them ended up going to the RCA to do design rather than art, which I don't know if it was good for them, but that's what it was. But what I'm trying to say is about the idea of the model. The model is so important in that stage because it is what allows us to examine the idea. It is an idea, and the moment that we have a materiality to this idea, we can start examining what are other possibilities. The other possibilities that is impossible to think about without a physical or a model of some sort. You know, for a mathematician will be a different thing. For us as designers, it is that physical part, because in that physical interchange we start thinking without language. We start thinking without trying to analyze from the same parameters that we have, and we work in a different format. So, for example, this is a project that we did. It's probably an industrial project. It's for Magis in Italy. It's a big company. And this is really the first time we did an industrial product, or a product that its main function was not to be functional, but just act as a thinking object. So this is a toy. It's about like 60 centimeters high. So it all started from this idea of, at the time, our daughter now is 17. At the time, she was like 3 or something like that. And we were once playing in our living room, and we were playing hide and seek. So imagine in a small living room, my only choice was to put a blanket on top of me. So I was a big volume sitting in the sofa, but she couldn't see me. So she comes and looks around and it's like, "Daddy, I cannot find you." And then I remember it was a book, so I said, "I'm in the book." And then I can hear her looking at the book. And then it's like, "But in which page?" And in that moment you understand how amazing it is to really look at a space like a book and feel it, not intellectually like we are doing right now. Intellectually we can understand that the book could be a space, but really feel it as a real possibility. You know? And then that led us to understand it's like with children, your earliest memories are from 4 years old in general terms. And by the time that you are 4, you already have been inducted into our sense of reality. So for us, when we started doing this toy, it was about this. Now, if suddenly all our toys didn't really have any character that show us what things are, like a car, or how do we behave in society, but that they were abstract enough for us to remain and keep remembering how this feeling was. No? It will completely change the way that we deal with the world as designers as well. So in terms of an industrial product, this is quite a weird thing, because it's a one object that every time you change the position becomes or suggests a different kind of character, but it is nothing. It's not a person or it's not a rabbit. It just could look or could be interpreted as such. So as a product, it's a completely rubbish product. It's probably the product in Magis that has sold less units of all the ones that they've ever made. But in contrast, is one of the products that is in more modern art museum collections as an industrial object from all their products. And it's precisely because of this potential to, as an object, to make you think, and make you think about other things that are not just that object, that are about design and okay. So systems. So systems for us, like you heard in the introduction, is the big thing for us. The systems are the models we work with, because they are the medium where all these objects are not. You understand that objects are always indexical. There are these moments that indicate all that structure that comes from up and down and how it becomes, but we are interested in that medium, no? And that how you change that medium, it produces changes in that index as well. So it's that interesting area of work for us, not that is not looking at the final thing, but looking at how you produce that final thing, so that final thing is different. So it's a project, I mean, we've done a lot of work with glass. So, because glass is an interesting material for us in terms of material or rematerializing these structures, and because it has no render to them, it is easy to try to imagine and see yourself projected into these spaces that are described. So for example, these are a series of body organs, but they are made as kind of industrial sites. And then we always film them so they can be projected to an architectural scale. So for example, for us, the films and the pieces, they are like two different kind of works, and they work and they are collected in the same way by the institutions that buy, because they work in that dialogue between the digital and the real. And again, like the film makes them look like digital constructs, but in reality they are just film in our studio. They are really big glass pieces. And I think that, again, while I was talking about doing work in terms to understand what is that thing that you're doing, so it's like in reality design or our activity for us is like an exercise into understanding that very thing that we are doing and understanding where design goes and what things can be understood as design and what things are lying outside and how you play with all these elements. No? So the quality of designing the sound for the movie becomes as important as the designing of the glass pieces or as the designing of the machine that allow us to rotate and create this kind of very special films. So you see a film by Poi. Poi is like a different rock and roll band that we have. So it's a group that we did with 2 students that came to our studio, and they asked us if we would do a master program for them. And we said, well, what are you talking about? So we invited them to come every weekend. We will came together and have these dialogues and discussions, and then we started creating books. You will see some of them afterwards. So POI stands for the PECAM Outer Space Initiative, because at the time we were working in this project around the idea of living Earth, but living as an attitude rather than just a science fiction. But anyway. Oh. Sorry. This shouldn't be here. I'm going to pass. Shouldn't have some. Well, okay. Let's see. So this is Horizons. This was supposed to be at the end, but anyway, it's an exhibition that we did in France, in the Halle Verrier. It's a big exhibition place, and again, this is a project where everything that you see is in reality a film, that it was like an analog film, but created as a 3-dimensional experience within this small inflatable. So all these inflatables, they were interconnected through sensors that people will trigger and create like a succession of events that will happen. So from generating the sound of the exhibition to kind of dialogues between the pieces. So these 2 pieces were set up as a kind of context of the place, so it's like this kind of silly dialogue. And it was this moment, the height of the crisis of the refugees. And for us it was not about the idea of the refugee, but it's the idea of arriving. You know? It's like when you hear all these stories, is of people living, and there is this moment when arriving doesn't quite happen. No? And that's something that, for us, I mean, coming from families that were refugees and economic migrants in that time, we understand and we could see the parallels between all these times. The same images are reproduced. The aesthetic of the event is the same. So it was very much important for us that the stories were all mixed. So there were stories, each of these characters represents a story that is told through the tattoos in their bodies. And these stories went from, I don't know, Spanish Civil War with friends of my family to actual sound. It was a trigger and a sensor connected to before that created the recognition event of the housing trigger. Anyway, these are again like higher models of the class. This was in an exhibition last year in Madrid. It is a model of a system it's called the fallacy of the closed system. So it's like a city again talking about all these ideas of protectionism. And what is interesting about the model is the moment that you create the model. It creates, sorry, let me explain. So it creates it shows how not possible these ideas are, not when you're talking about Brexit or, I don't know, all this trying to close things just doesn't work. And the only thing that you need to do is to create a model to understand that it's impossible. And I think that this was the model. But at the same time, again, like you have this mix of things. So it's like, for this one, we developed like an automatic kind of film that was played with this light that were rotating around the table. So each of those tables is 1.5 meters square. So it's in total, it's a glass piece, a glass city that is roughly 6 meters long. Oh my God, I got so confused with that sound. Well, fractals. This is another big area of our research, and it's like I was saying before, that dialogue between the digital and the analog, if you say. So it's like we are all the time trying to understand how we could apply the digital into an analog way. So we started creating installations that, for example, use materials, and we constructed like huge sculptures using the kind of same principle. So we created fractals that were stickers, and the stickers then they are mapped into the surface, and you create like a very slow render of the whole process. So this was in La Casa Encendida in Madrid. So again, with the idea, and this maybe is to reflect on this idea of transgression. Transgression doesn't really happen as such. I think that you have to give yourself that kind of working mode that is going to allow you to break the rules for yourself. So it's like, for us it was very intentional idea that we had to generate a context where we had the opportunity of arriving to things that it was going to be impossible to arrive in any other way. And I think that that's the same thing. I remember it's like, it's this interview with Iggy Pop, and they're interviewing him, and it's like, so you always made like this effort to be like an outsider, and Iggy Pop just answers, no, I always thought I was making commercial music, or at least what I thought should be commercial music. And I think that's so true, no? Is that you cannot intend to be transgressive, no? It's something that you are doing because that's the root and that's the belief of where your work is going. I think that you have to work on trying to do things differently, and it takes time and it takes decisions. So for us it was this moment when we started thinking, okay, we are so in control of all the tools that we know how to make things, that we end up doing the same things that everybody else does. So it's the only way that we can start doing is to rethink everything around that. Not only the way that we are making it, but what is the lifespan of these pieces? Why do we have to endorse permanence? Can we make things that are ephemeral, that can address other things, can work, and can bring things that is impossible to bring in any kind of other industrial level, but at the same time, bringing all these elements of graphics and experimentation. So it's always one part of the project that is really improvised and one part that is quite thought through. So it's like, it's again, giving yourself that opportunity for things to go slightly wrong, which is always good. So for example, this is in Mexico City, and there was a very different one because it was an installation that on the street it was for 1 week. And what it was nice, it was how it is in the center of the city. So it's like where in a street there is a massive market. And suddenly everybody that lives around are people that are living, squatting and living in the markets, and we became like the nursery for all the children. So they will come in the morning, leave the children with us, we will put them to work. And suddenly it became like almost their project, because these things, they start very much as rubbish, and then they were thinking, so what are you doing bringing rubbish to? But it's this moment where suddenly you start that render, that it kind of transforms, and then it became the thing. So the guy in the shop put the music on, and the guy with the doing tamales came around, and suddenly it was a party. And those are very different things from suddenly when you're doing things in galleries. No? So this was in Rice, in Houston. And for us, this was much more, again, going back into experimenting with the kind of object. And this was like what we call these total objects. No? It's an object that is an environment, but it has it has the integrity of a one thing, but it has all these layers of moving image, it had fountains, it had, so it was called garden object. And then we did a smaller version for a show in Milan. And this is one, so it was quite nice because the guy, does anyone recognize the guy on the right? Bravo. So one of our heroes, and it's always nice, I think that's the other thing, no? It's like, have heroes. And I think that heroes are so important, not only because it makes you you learn to be only critical with yourself rather than with the other. And I think that your heroes, they give you this thing that you are aspiring to. Again, going back to Iggy Pop, have you seen this, the Rollins Band? You know the Rollins Band? He's doing like this stand-up comedy, and he's talking about talking with Iggy Pop and how Iggy Pop is his hero. But it's his hero, but he says, but at the same time, I really want to kick his ass. No, he's like, and it's the same thing for us. For me, all the heroes is like, I truly admire, but I truly also want to kick their ass in my own way. You know? So it's like, it's that competition that drives you to achieve other things as well, and become truer to yourself. So again, talking about the idea of translating the digital, making the small digital object into a massive thing. So this is a different way that we started doing as well for a project in the 1U Biennale. So it was more about creating maps. So we started talking with the curator. She was interested in a kind of installation that dealt with these ideas of the digital. And then we proposed like this massive event. The title of the Biennale was Burning Down the House. So we proposed this kind of smoke that ran through the whole Biennale. So the Biennale was 2 massive halls with more than 100 artists from all over the world. And it was quite an amazing collaboration because the curators, they really believe in the idea and they managed to convince, I think, out of 100, if you say 105, only 5 people decided not to have this event happening in their own spaces. No? So basically, we started creating from low resolution images from internet stock. We created this vocabulary of shapes that then we started creating to the one-to-one event. No? So they became from going from the digital size to going back into what it was the real thing. No? And that was quite an interesting project because it was in total, it was almost 2 kilometers of the same image. The image was all the time different and it was changing according to the different artists, according to the direction of the flow of the people. So the smoke acted as a kind of sign. So it was like a signage project done, so you had a sense of direction going. And then the Biennale Foundation collaborated with us to create 2 limited edition of pieces, of digital pieces. One was this is in the DDC Foundation, so in a very different context, a kind of private museum context. So all those same files, they were then reworked into their specific space. And this is Multiplexer. A Multiplexer is a project that we started. I'm talking about all these things. All these things, they happen at the same time, but in different moments in time. So I think that Multiplexer looks like this. Multiplexer is a device that takes, it's like an electronic device that takes a multiple sign, concentrates it in terms to be able to then transmit it back into the multiple channels. No? So for us, it kind of represented this same moment. No? It's this moment of what is for us, the way that we deal with the things around us. And it's like all these things that are coming, that are mixed in the multiplexer, and then they are thrown again in a kind of design essay, no longer in a one thing, but in a multiplicity of outcomes. And these outcomes, they start being part of that same input for the next thing. So it's like if you imagine the rhizome, you have things that are happening and it's dragging all these connections and exploiting and dragging and exploiting. And I think that that's the important thing of when you are continuously investigating or thinking about something. Those things that you are creating, they are becoming also the material for your own investigation. They become as much part of that outside world as rhizome concept, if you say. So Multiplexer is also a magazine or a book scene, I will say. It's a publication that we do in Goldsmith. And again, it's not really a publication, it's a model. So it's a place where people submit and we take material coming from all sorts of from students in the BA to doctors to artists, and then everything is kind of collided. It's a place where these texts collide and create like this kind of alternative message. Now it becomes something else that you consume. You can consume individually, but you can also consume as a one shot, a one gin and tonic, if you say. So this is part of the first issue of Multiplexer. So it's a little piece that we had done with the Jake and Dinos Chapman family collection. But anyway, so the first issue has all these elements that explain the idea of multiplexer and how it's run. No? So every issue has like a password, and this password is kind of explored in a very abstract way through all these contributions that then are edited quite anarchically, so to create precisely that sense of contrast. No? So they are published in issue as well every time that we publish, like the year after, so you can see them online. So they have like from very graphic projects to essays. Anyway, you can check it out. Oh, what happened? Malfiction. So this again another project that explores the same thing. We started working with mapping applications, and then we realized that the mapping applications that you have in your telephone, when you put them in your satellite mode, in reality they are not. They tell you that this is a satellite image, but they are constructed 3D maps of the city. And because they are designed for small mobile devices, the moment that you start photographing and playing with how you can use the system, you start getting images like this. So you can get snapshots of the construction of the image. And what is interesting as well is that these maps, they kind of collapse the city in different moments in time, so you will see that even if you check, I don't know if Lisbon is done, that you are familiar with your city, you will realize that they might contain buildings that are no longer there, alongside buildings that have just been built, because there are also all these economical interests that companies that ask for their buildings to be introduced in the city. So in London it's quite dramatic, but it's quite interesting. So these are from London, so these are done, this we did for this article because we had been doing this work, and we generated this round table with a few designers and academics for Diseño magazine. So this is the actual pages, so it's all the kind of round table discussion. But you create, you can get snapshots of these kind of really surreal moments. So it's like for us, it's like we become like paparazzis of the internet. So we are forcing the application to slow down and to make more mistakes than those that it wants to do. And that this kind of activity gets you to this understanding that in reality this idea that you start thinking of the glitch as a kind of mistake, in reality is not such a mistake, but it's just a window that opens into how the system really works. And for us that had quite an interesting political connotation in terms of how, I'm going back to what Alpha 60 said at the beginning of the talk, what is that myth of the reality that we are seeing and how we can untangle it. And that was the kind of conversation done in the exhibition. So you have all these images of the city that are kind of collapscape here, but at the same time, suddenly you have still, nowadays you have the Olympic Stadium still under construction. So this is 2012, we are 2018. So you have the buildings that have just been built, that companies are paying for them to become part of also of this landscape of London. But you have those other buildings that nobody is interested so much anymore, that still have this contradiction in kind of historical terms, which is quite interesting for us. So it's very kind of anal interest. Because for us, it starts with this thing, but then you cannot stop yourself of exploring the photographs as well. So then you are starting to look for these minute events that are really interesting in terms of how aesthetically for you, but at the same time it has this other life. Ooh, I think I think I'm going very long. No? And I was talking about collapscapes. No, like this is a kind of work that we often do. Is like we start projects and we design also terms that kind of describe the things that we are doing. And collapscapes started with a commission. It's a private collector that commissioned us to do a project around the idea of industry. And we started to look at both industry in the traditional sense, but also our biggest interest, that is the film industry. No? And how in films, for example, as a technique, because you have a narrative imperative, because of how the industrialization of cinema is, you have to tell a story. So as a technique, you have to, you collapse time and space. So you put two places that don't make sense together in order to tell a story through montage. So we started doing, as a way of understanding this technique, we started to generating trailers of movies. So we made trailers, but only cutting off all the actors and only using the mise en scène, all the design bits of the movie. So what we will do is we did maybe 5 sessions. For each session we will do around 40 to 50 trailers, and then we will rent a cinema and create a one-day event. And here I just put 3 of them as a kind of sense, so that they are all between 1 minute 20 and 2 minutes. But they are kind of bits of fan fiction exploring this idea. So this is Bullet. And Bullet is quite a good one, because precisely even in the film, they do collapse San Francisco in order to create this sequence of the car going all the way. So if you map sequence by sequence the route of the car, you will realize there are all over the city, and all based together into a one thing.
How can you be part of it without becoming more and more callous? Your world is so far from the one I know. What will happen to us in time?
So in the sessions there will be one after the other one. So the sessions will have a theme. So we did, for example, originals and remakes, food stories. This was from the first.
Un grand palace
all from the
international,
first.
immense, baroque,
au décor fastueux mais glacé. Soyez attentifs. Un objet, un geste, un décor. Une attitude, le moindre détail a son importance. Pour la première fois au cinéma, vous serez le co-auteur d'un film. À partir des images que vous verrez, vous créerez vous-même l'histoire d'après votre sensibilité, votre caractère, votre humeur, votre vie passée. Tous les éléments vous seront donnés. À vous de conclure.
Greetings, my friend. We are all
This one is
interested
a
in
bit
the
of a
future,
cheat.
for that is where you and I are going to
Because the
spend
sessions
the
are called
rest of our
subdogma
lives.
for a reason,
And
because we
remember,
are
my friend,
dogmatic about the rules,
future
but from
events
time
such
to
as
time
these
we
will affect you in the
ignore
future.
the rules as well.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here. The incidents, the places. My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer. My friend.
Anyway, you can imagine an hour and a half of these things together. But this kind of reflection about how films are constructed also let us understand that that's how industry is constructed. No? And we started creating the idea of collapscapes. It started as a definition of a production technique rather than just something that happened only in storytelling. In reality, it's a way that how industry started forming, now forcefully removing and bringing together things that were apart in order to collapse the space and time that it took production. So for example, we started generating these kind of posters related to new industries. So you have Ford, Apple, and now that transport changed that trend of bringing, because it became faster and cheaper. What will it be if now these global industries that before they were just like little factories, now there are whole territories, they will come together. So we started creating these maps and then collapsing them into these kind of fictitious islands. So for this project, it also has this, again, we produce all these publications that are really kind of models, so they are as much thinking tools as they are documenting all the process and all these little ideas that are happening. So this off-screen is precisely about that. No? It's like we've seen these movies. The movie has a constructed frame, and everything that lies outside the frame in reality is what allows you to tell that story. So in terms of, as a designer, for us, that's the area that we're interested in. We started working a lot, both for ourselves and with our students, in exploring all these things that lie outside the screen. From the production side, now in terms of, like you say, what is behind the backdrop, to all the things that you know and you don't know about the story. You know? Like the typical example is like you see one person going inside a building and suddenly the light in the 5th floor switches on. You don't need to see that this person has gone inside, called the elevator, got up. You understand because you know how the building is constructed. So a film or a story is always playing with these bits of knowledge that you have that helps construct that world. So when we were doing collapscapes as part of that exhibition, we started trying to understand what it will be to kind of decompose these industrial products. So it's again starting to think about what is that production space of the image. So we did a few of these projects that are ongoing. So these are the ones that we show in this gallery in Geneva. So basically this was the idea of a film that could be produced that didn't need to happen in the same place because there were artificial coincidences. No? So you create these collage moments that create a different reality, but the things were filmed in completely different places, and eventually they could be filmed by different people, and then collapscape into an event somewhere. So these were projectors. Each projector had the sound, and you had fixed projectors that had also conversations and sounds. So there were these moments where these things mix and happen. So you have from Geneva to London to Madrid. And they were moving through this track continuously. This important thing is that's our daughter's finger. So this is a bit how the kind of installation looks. So going through that wall, and it arrived into this. So in this place it was back projected, so you could see the woman actually entering into the building. Anyway. But in terms of this idea, for this idea to work as a proposal, we needed to start thinking about how are we going to script this. So we generated a new program to write dialogues. So basically you had like lifelines, and then you could choose the amount of characters that you had, and it gave you like moments in time where the dialogues were happening, so you could put notes. So the idea was that in a kind of industrialization of this system, you could get your script and you know exactly that at 2 minutes 50 you have to say hello, and then all these things will act together. Now, because I think that that's the complexity, when you have one linear thing happening, then our actual way of creating dialogue is good. But when you have eventually multiple characters happening at the same time, how do you know where things are happening? If there is not an intervention of a director or a person directing that event in the moment. So basically this was done with collaborating with these coders, and became like a little application that we use that we call Socrates for the dialogues. But again, it's one of these projects that they have a reality within the activity that we do, and maybe have the possibility of becoming something else, but that, I don't know, it never happened the time, or we had the time to rethink about them. So it becomes a tool that you have and you use for yourself. But I think quite an interesting one. And this was another of the installations in a gallery that is a church in London. So it was the presentation of the first multiplexer issue. So with each of the issues we create a public event where things happen. This one was one of them. And I think this is, again, you see, there was a mistake. we've already seen this video, so we can skip it.